Hello, everybody. It is great to be here one more time. And my name is Gary Fowler. I'm a serial entrepreneur and investor. I've been involved in 17 startups and 2 unicorns. I was on the original management team at Click Software, which was sold to Salesforce for $1.35 billion, and also Eva.ai, an AI HR tech company. I'm the CEO and president of GSD Get Shit Done Venture Studios, a premier AI and quantum venture studio located in the heart, yes, the heart of Silicon Valley, Palo Alto. We believe that intellectual capacity is evenly spread around the world, but opportunities are not. And we go around the world looking for incredible startups. But with that, we also talk to incredible people. And I am honored, seriously honored to have Micah Fink on my show today. Micah is a former Navy SEAL. He's an entrepreneur. He cares. He's got an incredible charity called Heroes and Horses. And he's also the son-in-law of a very, very good longtime friend of mine. So I'm honored to have him on board today. And here's Micah. Hi, Micah. How are you?
Gary, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, so you have, I got to tell you, the most incredible story. I got wrapped up in the Veterans Project. So you're from the Catskills. You grew up upstate New York. You went down to New York City. You were there during September 11th. And you weren't just there. You weren't just a passive person. You actually went in and tried to help. And, Micah, what's it take to do that? I mean, some people, what's the difference between somebody stays on the sideline and somebody that gets in and cares?
Well, I always say that I think that people's fear of death comes from an ignorance of life. And so for me, my actions are representative of my character, and, characters form through experiences in life. And, I've had a lot of unique experiences in life, and it's not by my own volition. I you don't choose where you're born. You kind of wind up there. I could have been born in Etrea, but I didn't. I was born in the Catskills to a good family, a unique family, and those experiences, like all of us in life, gave me the opportunity to make choices. And what I learned at a young age was learn how to make those choices from my heart and not just from my mind. And so, sometimes I think that the mind turns on, you feel something, you want to do something, and the mind, flips on, and the operating system turns on and says, you shouldn't do that, or that's not good. And then you always have regrets, right? You're like, I knew it. I should have doubled down. I should have made that deal. I should have kissed that girl. I should have done the couple's moonlight, or whatever the experience is. And so, throughout my life, those experiences that I had that some people would look and say, oh, they're traumatic or they're difficult, they're really vehicles, I think, that I learned to use, that led me to the truth of who I was as a person. And so that ultimately, being on a telephone pole in Queens, New York, when the first plane hit the World Trade Centers on 9/11, I didn't have any experience. I didn't have any knowledge. I wasn't a rescue person. What I was a person that was fearless. And that fearlessness comes from an understanding of life. And so, I came down off that pole, and I was there when the Citibank Tower fell. I got buried myself, and found dead police officers and all kinds of other atrocities that I experienced, like so many on that day. And that was a really a pivotal moment in my life, and an evolution as a person that ultimately led me to making the decisions that, put me in a career that was even more dangerous than that experience itself.
Yeah. So so you go into the recruiter and they give you the story about, join the Navy and everybody's going to be a SEAL, right? And they're not, they're just like paint the picture, right? Because they're salespeople.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how does that go? You go in there, you go in and, you enlist and you listen to them. Did you think that was going to happen? You were going to be a Navy SEAL right off the spot? They didn't talk probably about buds and all the challenges and Hell Week and all that, but how was that?
It's funny looking back now, knowing what I know. I was really actually recruited. a lot of I was recruited because I didn't know what the Navy SEALs were. I didn't even know that those units existed. I actually went to join to become an Army Ranger, and I was getting the runaround by the Army, and they wanted me to do all these other things. And it just seemed, I had a job working on a used car lot. Like I understood what was happening right there. I was getting hustled.
Mm-hmm.
And look inside, sharp, AC's ice cold,
Mm-hmm.
and then the motor blows up in your face. And so the Navy guy actually came out and approached me, and I started talking with him, and he brings
Were they
me
side by side? Sometimes you see.
yeah, they were all side by side. You go to the mall. I was
Yeah, exactly.
you go to the mall. If you don't get in the military, you get an orange Julius and a pretzel, So I the guy came up, started talking to me. So I went in the office, and he shows me a video, and it's your 1980s, post-Vietnam, everyone's ripped, wearing tiny shorts, doing pull-ups, heavy metal music's playing, they're coming out. And I mean, it was just the coolest thing. They're jumping out of airplanes. And I was like, man, what is this? And he said, these are the Navy SEALs. Sounds like that's what you want to do. And I was like, definitely, I'm in. Like, I mean, I didn't really know. And after doing the research and figuring out what I was getting into, I was like, wow, this is a serious fraternity of warriors that have a legacy spanning back to the Scouts and Raiders. And so I immersed myself in the library. Actually, back in the day, the library, I don't even know if they still exist anymore, but I went in there and I started reading, and I read pretty much every book I could get my hands on and immersed myself in it, began working out and training. And, I'd been a boxer, on and off throughout my entire life. So I was no stranger to fitness, but, the preparation and everything, I think was 10% of it. The rest of it was my character that I had developed through what some would consider a difficult childhood and upbringing and life. And so, ultimately it was the character that got me through, not just the physical component. So yeah, you sign up, you get a SEAL contract, and, if you don't make it, then they get to do the downside is they get to put you wherever they want. And let me tell you something, it's not the sexiest job. It's like, you're the guy below the guy that chips the paint, basically. You catch the paint that he chips, and with boxing gloves on. So it's a terrible outcome if you don't make it. And I realized that. And so, yeah, I had the contract and I rolled right through. And it was, it's one of the greatest experiences that I had in my life, because ultimately it just further revealed who I was as a person. It's like challenges in life they're not here to break us. They're not here to crush us. They're here to reveal who we really are outside of the analytical. And that's what ultimately where character exists. Character exists, it exists beyond the mind. And so, when you apply pressure one time to something, you never get a diamond, but it's that continual pressure over and over. The difference between us and a diamond is that we have a choice to say, I either accept this or I don't accept this. And to me, choices, I learned at a young age, are the only thing that you'll ever own in this life. Markets can change, jobs can change, people can die, things can happen, wars can happen, accidents can happen, traumas can happen, whatever. But after that experience, you always have a choice. And in that choice, it either leads you further away from where you're supposed to go or brings you closer. And so that's the power that we all possess. And so realizing, sitting in the cold water, being screamed at by guys like, deprivation, hell week, training, psychological observations, all these things analyzed constantly, you feel like you're in perpetual failure, gave me an opportunity to hold on to what I had already established at a young age and actually reinforce that. And so training is easy because it's nothing like combat. So like training, I mean, you train for 10 years to fight for 10 seconds because that 10 seconds will dictate whether you continue on in this life or you don't. And so, I learned to make those choices. And listen, I'm not saying it was easy. It was some of the hardest things I ever did because I always had that choice right there. It was a little bell. We should all have a little bell right next to us at all times where we can just, we have the option to tap out. And sadly we do. And most people do tap out of life. And they think that they're helping themselves by avoiding that. But once they ring the bell and they get the burrito and they get the coffee and they're looking at everybody else continuing on, they realized that they made a mistake. And I mean, I started with 157 guys and graduated 13 original students, and you would have never picked the graduates out of the group of guys that started.
Wow. I mean, and so what's the difference in the mentality? What's the difference between, because some of them aren't that tough, right? Some could be skinnier or whatever, but what's the difference? What's the grit that they have, the difference to be able to succeed?
It's character. It's character. I think like it's something that experiences in life teach you. So you have the guy, for instance, he was he took Sally home from the prom. He was the king. He won everything. He did everything. He had muscles you've never even seen before. He was the champion of everything. He had the best car. He was the best. He never lost. He was always on top. And then he gets into a place which is the whole program is designed in the no-win option, right? So it's perpetual failures. Yeah, you have things that you need to pass, but they want to see you deal with failure. Because let me tell you something, going into war, there's real failure. And the failures have implications that are the highest in human existence, right? So these individuals have never learned to fail. They've only ever won. And so when failure comes, they realize they've been living in a fake world and they're feeling it for the first time. And what do? They see the shiny bell, and the shiny bell is relief. So they reach over and they drink the poison, and they think that, so the very thing they wanted, all they had to do is make a different choice, but they'd never learned at a young age. And I think the individuals, the ragtag bunch of guys, the 5'6" dude that weighs 130 pounds, that's carrying a 100-pound pack. I mean, these guys have character, and the harder you push on them, the stronger their character gets. And the more unstoppable they become. The other ones are now just entering the world that most of us had already been living in. And so it just, struggle is what gives everything in life value. And so without that struggle component, there is no value. If there is no struggle, it's not worth doing it, right? It's why the guy makes 1 billion and then he goes back and does a startup, right? Because there's value in overcoming and constantly being in that zone where you're evolving and you're growing and you're moving the pieces around. And then when you get there, you're like, they want to do it again, right? Because they look back. It's like I tell guys, with my work at Heroes and Horses, I'm like, why do you spend, you do 10 years in the military, then you spend the next 30 years talking about what you did for 10 years, right? And so experiences are supposed to keep us moving forward. They're not supposed to become, stumbling blocks where our growth ends because so success and failure, essentially what I'm saying, is one and the same. If all you do is have a great success, you failed. And also all you ever did is have a great failure, then you failed, right? So they exist one and the same. And so I think the people that made it through either learned that lesson in real time or had established that early on in their life. And I think about some of the guys, some of them had some really tough, upbringings and things like that, and met challenges. Guys, fathers were shot by the cops. They had all kinds of things that they had faced. And so you want to freeze me, you want to torture me, you can't hurt me, you can't kill me. I already know that. I'd rather die than give in to you. And that's ultimately what the training is designed to do. It's designed to reveal what the individual has in character form, and then bring it out and turn them into a soldier.
So you go down through this. So you end up getting deployed. How did you go down? When you go down through that, Mike, a couple things. Did you ever just get so pissed off at a superior you wanted to punch him? I mean, sometimes life, a lot. You think I want to knock that guy out?
Listen, constantly, because I was that kind of guy. Ultimately I was law of the jungle kind of guy. I was a non-conformist type person as well. So the military was a difficult transition. I'll never forget it. There was a guy that walked in and he came in my room and he told me to, I don't forget what it was. He told me to turn the music down or something like that. And I just walked up to him. I had just started Buds. I was brand new. So I was not new to the military, made it through boot camp, did all the, little A school they used to have to do. And now I'm at Buds. This guy comes walking in the room. And I remember I told him, I walked up to his face and I used some unpleasant language. And I told him, get out of my room or I'll throw you out of this room. And he looks at me and he says, well, I'm a first-class petty officer. And I'm like, one? And he just like, and I closed the door and my roommate's like, dude, you can't do that. I'm like, why? He's like, he was in my room. And he's like, you can't say that. I'm like, why? He's like, because he's your superior. I'm like, not superior to me. All right. Like, and then but like, honestly, like in my brain, looking back, I was telling somebody when I first bought my very first home, I was doing all this construction work myself with my wife. We're building, we're ripping out stuff. We ended up creating this huge apartment, and so like towards the end, I got a little over my head with this final thing. My buddy goes, well, we'll just add it to your building permit. I said, my what? He goes, your building permit. I said, I don't need a building permit. And he's like, yeah, you do. And I'm like, for what? And he's like, I'm like, this is my house. I own it. I bought it. It's mine. He's like, yeah, but you have to get a permit, like to do. I was like, why? I own it. It's mine. I bought it. Like I paid for it. And he's like, so like I've grown beyond that now, but that's how my mind, always worked because I was always brought up to think for yourself. And so it was touch and go at times. And then also there's people in the military that I realized, they're not all there to fight. Some of them are there for a career and some are there to be soldiers. There's career people that are there to make a career and get through the ranks and level up, just like any other, position, start at middle management and work your way up through the ranks. And there's other guys there that are strictly to go to war and they're real. And that is not everybody. And there is one thing I learned is that there's levels of people. And you learn that very quickly. You find out who the dogs that bite are and the ones that don't. That bark. Yeah, exactly.
So you go down through this. How, when you're out there for the very first time and you're facing the enemy, what goes through your mind? I mean, is the adrenaline, like, does the training kick in, or what happens when you're a medic, right? And
yeah.
You're gonna have to take care of a lot of things. What happens when you're the first time when you're facing the enemy and somebody gets shot and you got to deal with it? Does the training kick in? Does that character and grit kick in? What happens?
Well, I think it's a combination of it all, but I think it's the training. I think you have done things, you have seen things, you have trained at such a high level and been exposed to so much induced stress and been under observation, self-induced stress, external stresses, that really when it happens, you are initially you get your tunnel visioned in the beginning and you can see the more mature guys, the older warriors in your community where they're moving, they're communicating, they're tactically thinking. So much is going on. They're separated from the noise and the scream, the chaos, the radios, the air overhead, all the things. And you're like, I got to just focus on this like one thing. I'm helping this guy. But as you mature, the training takes a more profound role, and then the blinders start to come off. And throughout my career, through the SEAL teams, and then into the working for OGAs, in that world, I did 13 combat tours. So I by the time the end of it came, I wasn't phased very much by anything, and I was able to tactically move and make complex decisions under really high stress. So like imagine running up a flight of stairs as fast as you possibly can, get your heart rate up to 180, and then kneel down on the ground and try to pick up a bunch of nickels, right? And put them in a stack, right? So it's hard to do fine movements under that kind of stress. Well, that comes through training, and it comes through understanding your breath and understanding the moment and combat exposure. So it's not like you get out of training, you show up on your first deployment and you're some kind of like superhero or anything like that. You're learning and being mentored by the guys that have gone before you, and that sometimes keep you from getting killed, because when you go there, you're so amped up initially. You're like been training for the Super Bowl, and now the game's here, and you have to be prevented also from rushing to your own death. And so it's a progress to develop an elite warrior, an elite soldier, an elite anything. It takes pressure, and it takes time, and it takes failure after failure after failure after failure, until you can't get it wrong. until every time you have gone to such a level that you're going to make that decision to be the guy that goes in the door, that puts the dot and does what he has to do. Doesn't matter what is happening. It doesn't happen overnight. And that's why, that's why that unit is the best in the world.
How does it go, Mike? Did you ever have a question about when you were going into an operation? Do you ever have questions about whether it's right or wrong? Do you ever have those kind of things, or does the training come over top of it?
Well, I think now, I mean, retrospectively, you look back and you're like, I was a machine. I was a part of the machine. I really existed for war. I mean, at the end of the day, you can put all the frills on it and all the stuff you want to put on and put all the movies on and all the things. But when people in those units come for you, they're coming to kill you. It doesn't matter where you are, what you're doing. It's at the end of the day, you are a highly advanced, sophisticated killing machine. And so at the time, you don't realize it. It's every night. It's every year. You're there. Your mission briefs. These are the bad guys. This is the enemy. You're going. You get perspective and you get distance, and you look back and you see things for what they are in the world. You look at the withdrawal of Afghanistan. You look at the execution of thousands of our allies and partners, and all. You look at all these things. You look at the Iraq War. You look at all this stuff from a different lens now, and you look back and you're like, "Wow, I was really programmed." Because that's what it is. How do you take a kid who's never been in a fist fight in his life? He grew up on a farm in Iowa, and 27 weeks later, he's marching through the streets 5,000-6,000 miles away, and he's killing anybody that gets in his way. Like, what happened in those 27 weeks?
Yeah, no, it's amazing. So let's pick up on that point. So one of the things that I read in the Veterans Project is making the transition out. So you go in there, you're a killing machine, and you go to jail if you do those kind of things when you come back to society. How do you transition over? And, let's talk about heroes and horses and post-traumatic stress syndrome. And how do you take people from that environment and transition them over? Because you have one sense of reality. Now you can come to another one where those things that you did aren't accepted in the society, right?
Yeah, I mean, and to me, that's where we're missing it. If you look at America's longest war, okay, so America's longest war, 20 years plus, it's actually still going on in what they would call like a low intensity conflict right now. So it's all happening proxy, and there's guys all over the world. Matter of fact, the United States last year waged war in 88 countries. Most people don't know that. Great article in USA Today last year about that, where you start to see like, wow, there's a whole other wars that you don't even know about going on, and real conflict. And so you're like, you have 2.7 million that have served in the 20-year war. All right, we'll just talk about OIF, OEF, New Don't, whatever. And so you're saying, okay, so 7,000 have died in the 20-year war. So 7,000, that's about 350 a year if you were to average it out, were killed. There's 1,500 amputees. All right, so 1,500 soldiers have lost limbs, and 155,000 have killed themselves since 2005. There's 50,000 nonprofit institutions and help organizations for veterans in North America today. Between 2012 and the end of 2020, we spent $92 billion on helping them. And today, every 64 minutes, a veteran kills themselves. So what's happening? Because we are how can we have all this money and all these institutions, this huge number of people, a small number of deaths relative? I mean, look at World War II, right? 496,000 were killed in World War II. I mean, that's an unbelievable number. How do we have these problems? Social problems, right? We've got PTSD. We've got 2 in 6 veterans on psychiatric medications. We've got drugs, alcohol. Only 4.5% are attempting to become entrepreneurs or start businesses, but there's all these institutions. You got the keys to the kingdom, but people do nothing. So what's happening? Well, what's happening is that the system is the problem, because it's not about reintegrating people. It's about forgetting experiences. And experiences are the vehicles, like I said in the beginning, that lead us to the truth of who we are. So you rob that person of the very experience that they need to have a greater realization of what they are, and then stand upon those experiences. Instead, we victimize people. So they have this victimization. You add narcotics, entitlements, right? You're handing out paychecks to 25-year-olds that are sitting on their couch, or, or morbidly obese, or they don't work, they don't do anything. And we blame it on the military in 2005. It's 2022, right? And so now we have an entire generation that's like basically, they're basically a welfare generation. If you just look at the numbers and you put it out there, you're like, how is that possible with all this stuff? So these institutions only work for an individual that has the ability to help themselves. Because otherwise we take a person that has sophisticated programming that does not work here. And then we take that programming and we take victimization and we put them together, right? And what's left? Emotion. Right. So the higher the emotional quotient in an experience, the more profound the memory. Now, we use the example, like, would you remember, you go down, you get an icy cone. You're not really going to remember that 5 years ago. You go down, you get an icy cone, and then the dude walks up and blasts the dude's head off and robs the icy cone stand while you're standing there with your tutti frutti. You're going to remember that for the rest of your life. And then so when you walk by the next icy stand, your heart rate goes up and people say, oh, you got PTSD. You need meds. No, what's happening is that's what creates a memory. So the higher the emotional quotient, the more profound the memory, because I want to stay alive. So I got to avoid the icy stand, right? Well, that's not where it ends in our development. So what we've done is we've created a whole generation of victims. And victims that are heavily funded, heavily drugged, and the numbers speak for themselves. And so in my own journey, I did a lot of other things, but I never took the poisons. I didn't take the conventional route because I didn't.
You went to a psychiatrist, a 25-year-old that was said you're got post-traumatic stress syndrome, bipolar, and all this stuff. And you're telling you these things and you're listening to it. I remember in the Veterans Project, I was, read about it. And so was that the occasion where everything came to light and you said, listen, this is like bullshit. I don't want to do it anymore.
Once again, I'm the guy that, as the guy tells me to do something, I'm like, I don't think you can come in my room. Right. Because I just didn't understand that. Wait a second. I knew what I had been doing in my previous jobs. All the things that I've been entrusted with, okay? Huge, enormous sums of monies of assets, responsibility, okay, global implications. And weeks later, I'm now handicapped.
Yeah, no, it doesn't make any sense. So
it makes no sense. And then there's a secret substance.
How can you go through, you know what I mean? Go through Buds and Hell Week and Afghanistan and all these other 9 different deals as a paramilitary, and then all of a sudden you come back and you're got a handicap. I mean, there's something wrong with the program, right?
There's something severely wrong. And then to say like, hey, that I only met you for 45 minutes. You've lived 40 years on this earth. And in 45 minutes, I have some things that were created, faraway lands that are going to get you back to normal. And I'm like, well, first of all, what is normal? What's normal for the deer is chaos for the fish, and what's chaos for the fish is normal for the deer. Well, we're not all the same. How are you going to lump me into this? And then why do you want to give me this stuff? I look it up on the internet, and I'm like, I look at the side effects, suicide, this and that. I'm like, but guess what happened? I did a video called Aspects, which is all the aspects that we use in the program. And what I'm talking about in there is that, like, the Native Americans believe that when you diagnose someone, that you curse them. And I'll tell you right now, look, I learned that much later on, but I remember thinking to myself, something's wrong with me, right? Because a person in a white coat told me when I wasn't thinking anything was wrong with me, then all of a sudden everything that started happening, it started playing.
When you get labeled, Micah, and you were saying you had a pizza box and you thought it was an IED for a second.
Yeah.
Back, right?
Yeah. I mean, because this is what happens. This is what we do to people. People like, hey, are you okay? You're like, what? You're like, you're kind of walking with a limp. You're like, really? And then you're like, my knee kind of hurts. That's kind of weird.
Yeah, it's
right? Like,
it's crazy because you start to believe the bullshit. So you come down, you did your first excursion. You're out with 2 weeks with your buddies. You bring some friends in, probably from the Navy SEALs that come in. One of them had a tin foil hat on because he started getting a little paranoid, right?
Yeah.
And so you go on this first journey. You do your mountaineering. You're up in there. You got a tent. It's snowing and all this. You've never done this kind of stuff before, and then you do it again in 2 more weeks, right? You go back out again and say, well, so did you have a cathartic experience? Could you feel yourself getting better by discovering yourself and having to rely on the horse? What was it that triggered it? That you
said, I mean, listen,
good.
Horses initially, like, yes and yes. Horses to me, and I can talk a lot about my work with wild Mustangs and all that stuff. But like horses, they're a mirror reflection of who we are, and so who you really are. And horses can't lie. Okay, they're not like a human. They don't lie to you. They're not like doing this deal but really doing a secret deal on the back end. They are the most honest creature, and so they sense who you are intuitively, and that's what's kept them alive through the Pleistocene, through the Holocene. Okay, they survived the dinosaurs, the younger Dryas impacts, right? Like they are not smart, but instinctually they can feel and sense everything, and they've done that to stay away from predators, us. So what the horse is putting back on you is really how you really feel on the inside, and that's once you learn that, that's a powerful relationship, the predator and prey relationship. But what initially happened with those trips was, and at the time, let me tell you something, how I got into all this nonprofit stuff, it was the best and the worst thing that ever happened to me, because the guys that I met were the biggest crooks on the face of the earth. They're one of the 50,000 groups out there that are basically ripping people off, okay, and doing nothing, because in the absence of fixing the problem, I have no business, right? My whole business model goes away. So I looking back, I'm like, wow, that was really a profound relationship, because it showed me how the corruption essentially associated with helping people, which we can't help people. People have to help themselves. So that's ultimately what we do. And so through those experiences with these guys, the struggle and the challenge and being out there, I began to slow down, and I began to look at myself in a way that I hadn't done since really I joined the military, where I started seeing myself separate from my experiences and seeing myself for who I actually was as a person. And so as I began to focus in on that and not so much on the experiences stayed. So the idea is not to forget. The idea is to remember. And the idea is not to ask. The idea is to listen and to be still. And so, being in the mountains and being with horses and raw environmental challenges teaches you to be still and in that present moment. And then in that moment is when you're listening, and that's when you feel it. And then you use your mind, will, and emotions to begin to do those things. And so that was a massive pivotal point in my life. And it didn't happen it didn't happen in a hospital. It didn't happen with a doctor. It didn't happen with a psychiatrist. It didn't happen. It happened in my own heart. And so that's ultimately, what this program is about over 41 days. I just was telling the gals in the office this morning, I said, listen, the definition of a good leader is that, people go through this whole process, the most comprehensive process in North America for veterans, right? But at the end, I, as a leader, they think has done nothing. I've done nothing. And I've been saying that since the beginning. I don't do anything. I don't do it. And so and then the profound thing is that what they realize is that what they've been looking for this whole time, all the wasted years, right? And they're never wasted, but all that shit that they've gone through, everything, what they were looking for the whole time, they already had. They already had it. They were just focused in the wrong direction, looking for the next higher authority to tell them. And so as I talk about social return on investment, and I talk about SROI, and I talk about how people that support this are investors and they should expect outcomes, right? And how we have to start getting back to human development, start developing people once again, not processes and ideas that we concoct that we think are going to get person to a predetermined outcome, because that's none of your business. It's none of your business. It's their business. It's their life. Get back to the dignity of the human experience. And so we provide over 41 days, the most comprehensive look at yourself that you can have, because when it all sheds away and it all bleeds down, what you're really left with is the man in the mirror. And some of them are seeing it for the first time in a very long time, or some people for the first time in their whole life. And that's where the change begins. And the change becomes proprietary to the individual. But at the end of the day, you have to wake up and do. And that's where we're having a breakdown as a society, right? You could have the best ideas and get fired up and run across the coals and scream and do the things and get the stuff, right? But if you don't get up when the alarm goes off on Monday morning and get your ass moving, right? Doesn't matter. Because then what do you need? You need to feed another idea. So then you head over to the Barnes and Nobles, you find the next book to get you fired up. You find the next video to get you going. You have to do. And then those small doings lead to bigger things. It's just like building any institution, right? It's one thing on top of the next thing. One thing on top. It's the things that you do in consistency. And so over 41 days, we take all the things away you don't need in your life, right? There's no dairy, there's no sugar, there's no cheese, there's no honey. The average person loses 20 pounds. They'll ride between 500 and 600 miles on their horses. They'll spend 22 days in the wilderness. They'll get into Lakota sweat lodges. They'll learn to meditate. They'll get into an ice tank every day. They'll read books. They'll shoe horses. They'll work in blacksmithing. They will walk 80 miles just to meals. They will learn to honor everything that they do, themselves particularly, honor their bodies, honor their minds, right? Honor their sovereignty, their morning routines. But I can't do that for them. They have a choice every morning they wake up. I either accept this or I don't accept this. And so all of us, every person, veteran or non-veteran, it doesn't really matter. We say, oh, this is your trauma or this is my trauma, because that allows people to create businesses and institutions, right? Yeah. But at the end of the day, it's all trauma. Life itself is trauma, all right? Being born is trauma, all right? I mean, think about it. Think about where you come from, and then you land, and they put a plastic shield over your head and start injecting you with stuff and wipe stuff in your eyes and start trimming your body parts off and then put you in pink blankets, and you're like, what just happened to me, right? So life is trauma, and it's supposed to be difficult. So if you just realize that right now in this moment, that life is supposed to be difficult, because that's what gives you the opportunity to make a choice. I tell people, the world wouldn't exist if it was all good, because there would be nothing to choose.
It would probably be boring, actually.
There would be no reason to exist. We would be a laptop, right? There would be nothing to choose. So in the absence of contrast, there's no choice. In the absence of choice, then what's the point, right? It's the free will. So everything that comes to you, every tough experience, every death, every hardship, every firing, the loss of the leg, it doesn't really matter. Those, as difficult as they are opportunities. They're opportunities for you. Seize them. Seize those opportunities, because you will look back in your life and be so thankful that you got fired. You'll be so thankful that Betty ran off with Tony. Like, it was the best thing that ever happened to you, right? And you look back and you're like, wow. At the time, oh my God, Betty, you're sending the love songs, you're doing the thing, right? But if you just take those lenses off and realize that all these experiences are here to teach you something particular, and you find that lesson, your life starts to accelerate. and it accelerates and accelerates and accelerates and accelerates. And you're never the victim of anything. You're only the victim of opportunity, no matter what it is.
No, I agree with you. And people focus on the negative shit side of life a lot. They don't think about look themselves in the mirror. I mean, you're the one that controls your destiny. It's not somebody else. It's you. You got to look yourself in the mirror, pick yourself up, grab yourself and move yourself forward. And, you see a lot of people, they say, well, how can you want to do this? Or how do you want to do that? Or, why do you travel? Why do you learn languages or whatever it is? But the thing is, why not? It's fun. You keep that childlike curiosity and believe in yourself and your dreams, you can accomplish everything. And it is the big million effect, the self-fulfilling prophecy. You become what you believe you want to be, right? And
exactly. 100%.
If you don't do that, what's life all about? Micah, listen, we're coming out. I'm actually 15 minutes over. I love this conversation. We'll have to do a part 2. Listen, we have a lot of viewers out there from around the world. Just one thing, how do we make this world a better place, Micah? We got a lot of crazy shit going on right now, around the world. How do we make it a better place?
You change the world by changing yourself. That is how you change the world. You change the world by changing yourself, because we are the world. Do the work on yourself and the world around you will change. And always remember that nothing lasts. Nothing lasts.
No, that's great. Mike, I want to thank you so much for joining my show today. I really appreciate it. And we'll have to do a part 2.
Absolutely.
It's amazing. To my audience out there, thank you one more time for joining GSD Presents Silicon Valley AI and Tech. And my name is Gary Fowler, and I'm your host. Stay tuned for another edition on Thursday. Stay happy, stay safe, and stay healthy. I'll see you soon. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Gary, absolutely, bud.
Take care.